Hey, my name's Shannon Bell. I'm a Journeyman Lineman here at Cullman Electric Cooperative. And today I'm going to be reading Dan the Bucket Truck, illustrated by Dan Davis and Katie Cox, and written by Katie Cox. Dan the Bucket Truck was a brand new from the factory. He'd been special ordered by the company. He was the toughest, shiniest, and biggest truck on the road. Dan's first day on the job was a big one. His very first work partner was Mr. Foreman himself. Mr. Foreman walked with confidence and had a very serious voice. He was in charge. Mr. Foreman sat in the driver's seat and said, "Dan, are you ready to work? Because no one works harder than a lineman." Dan started his diesel engine with a roar, sending black smoke into the air. "Put me to work, boss," he proudly replied. Dan could hear rain hitting the metal roof late one night. Ting, ting, ting. It was pouring hard outside, and inside the warehouse sounded like a monsoon. Dan heard over the company radio strong winds and lots of freezing rain. But it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and the linemen were sleeping. But sure enough, he watched the linemen come to work soon after the call went out with excitement in their eyes. The power was out. Mr. Foreman drove out into the downpour. Trees were down everywhere, and freezing rain was pelting everything in sight. Mr. Foreman zipped up his coat, put his hard hat on, and went to work. Dan never heard the man complain about the horrible working conditions. It was Dan's first big storm. He was so excited. He worked as hard as he could to keep up with the hard-working, determined linemen. Dan lifted the men up in the bucket as high as he could reach so that they could work on the power poles. He wanted to help his new friends restore power to the tiny town. After 30 long hours, all the power was back on. "Time to go home, boys," said Mr. Foreman as he climbed into the truck, spilling coffee on the brand-new seats. He scrubbed and scrubbed, but there was still a stain from the coffee, a stain that Dan was very proud of, his very first outage. After his time working with Mr. Foreman, calling the shots and leading the pack, it was time for Dan's next big adventure with 2 new work partners. The company gave Dan 2 journeyman linemen. Their names were Trapper and Marshall, and they were the best of friends. They walked tall with their hard hats on and big smiles on their faces. Dan loved spending time with his 2 new work partners. They were the hardest workers he had ever seen. They worked and worked until everyone had power. Trapper and Marshall loved telling Dan stories about their families. These stories quickly became Dan's favorites. It was Christmas morning when Dan heard over the radio, "Biggest storm ever, high winds and 18 inches of snow." But it was Christmas, Dan thought, and Trapper and Marshall were home with their families celebrating. But sure enough, here came the hard-working, eager journeyman linemen, leaving their families at home on Christmas, ready to do the job few could handle. Dan, Trapper, and Marshall spent the next week working as many hours as the company would allow, restoring power to the tiny town once again. On the last day of the big storm, Trapper was clearing the road of fallen trees. Dan was so tired from pulling the heavy trees off the road as Trapper and Marshall sawed them into pieces. It was the last section of the power line to be fixed when, boom, a branch hit Dan right on the hood, leaving a dent scratching his paint. It was a dent Dan hoped they would never fix. It made him remember the determined journeyman who restored power to the tiny town on Christmas. He will always remember watching the town light up with Christmas lights as the men worked. It was a very magical moment. 1 year later, Dan's keys were handed to a new apprentice lineman. His name was Tom. Tom had just finished lineman school, and it was his very first day on the job. Mr. Foreman came in the warehouse and hollered to Dan, "Teach him well and keep him safe, Dan." Tom was just starting his career, and Dan was so excited to be Tom's very first bucket truck. Dan spent the first day telling Tom everything he knew. Tom even pretended to laugh at Dan's horrible jokes. It was lunchtime, and all the men were eating their lunches and laughing at each other's jokes when a call came over the radio. "House fire at 13 Macy Lane." "Hurry, hurry," Dan yelled as he started up his diesel engine with a loud roar. Tom the apprentice jumped into the cab ready for his first call. Dan got him there as fast as his wheels would carry him down the snowy highway. Dan smiled as he watched the new apprentice running through the deep snow to turn the power off. The power had to be turned off before the firefighters could fight the mighty blaze safely. As the years went on, Dan spent a lot of time with the apprentice. They worked as a team, doing anything and everything Mr. Foreman said. During his time, Dan got many new dents and scratches. He even backed into a power pole one night. When Tom finished the apprenticeship and became a journeyman, The company rewarded him with a new shiny bucket truck. Dan cried happy tears of windshield wiper fluid. Time went on, and more storms, more dents, more linemen came along. There was always a pole to be fixed, wire to be strung throughout the tiny town. It was a constant job keeping the power on, a job only a lineman could do. Soon Dan was the oldest bucket truck at the warehouse. He was no longer the biggest, shiniest, or toughest, but he was the wisest, and no one cared more about the lineman than Dan. The company had a new job for Dan. Dan spent the rest of his years at the lineman school teaching new linemen how to drive a bucket truck, set a power pole, restore power, and work hard. Dan loved as the new classes came along. First he would show them the coffee stain from Mr. Foreman. He got his first outage. Then he would show them the huge dent in his hood from hard-working Journeyman on Christmas. But his favorite dents and scratches to show the boys were from the apprentice, Tom. On the first day of each class, Dan would smile and tell all the students, "I challenge you to find anyone in the world who works harder than a lineman." Special note from the author. Thank you to all the men and women who work tirelessly to help provide electricity. I believe linemen are heroes and deserve more recognition. I'm the daughter of a lineman. I'm also married to a lineman. I've seen my dad and my husband work long hours in scorching heat and below freezing temperatures. Linemen have a physically and mentally demanding job that few can handle. The men and women who make up the brotherhood of linemen are the hardest working, smartest, and toughest people I have ever met. I truly hope that everyone that this book comes in contact with is lucky enough to know a lineman. So today we've read Dan the Bucket Truck. Thank you to all the men and women who have become linemen. Without your dedication, the world would be a very dark place.